On that note, I think, Mr. Pollack, if you would like to comment on the last comments, please, I'll give you a minute to retort.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I want only to make 2 points. One, when it comes to subprime mortgage-backed securities, of course, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were among the biggest buyers and the richest bids for subprime securities. But on a more general point, having to do with credit policy and housing finance policy everywhere, the worst thing you can do for somebody is to make them a loan they can't afford.
No disagreement.
I think we're getting ready to wrap up, so, and I will be very brief. Overall, I think to bring this all together at where we're at, the federal debt stands at $14 trillion. GSE debt stands at $8 trillion. I'll ask Mr. Pollack, what are the implications of this unsustainable debt load in a nutshell?
Unsustainable debt can't be sustained, and it has to be addressed and adjusted to, and it usually involves finding ways to reschedule, restructure, or inflate your way out of it, and we're faced with a really tough problem, as you suggest, Congressman.
My last question, Mr. Calabria. You've proposed that Congress establish a recruitment fee on all mortgages purchased by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to reduce the deficit and to recoup as much of the losses as possible. Just very briefly, how would that work?
Well, essentially, it could be a fee that the GSEs charge to any lender that sells them, the mortgage, and then that fee is recovered just like the way the guarantee fee structure is worked now. Essentially, you'd layer it on top of the guarantee fee that the GSEs already require from lenders, and then you put it off to pay down the amount of money we've put in. So I certainly would not suggest that we charge them any more than we've already put in, but just as an attempt to recoup what we've put in.
Okay. And in closing, I would just like to say that we've heard both sides, and that on one hand, we need the government to make sure that we still have mortgages, and without it, there'll be the collapse of our economy and the collapse of home housing. My inclination innately is always that where there is a need, the market will fill that need, and that this country was founded on private sector principles that have really risen to the occasion time and time again. And if the government were to, say, step aside and move out of the way of our free market, it would thrive. And a lot of the answers to this insurmountable debt is that free market, the enterprise, the entrepreneurial spirit that has made us great and will continue to make us the greatest nation in the world. And with that, I yield back the rest of my time.
And the gentleman yields back, but the gentlelady from New York have 1 minute left of his time to use for any other questions that she has.
Would the panel agree that, in fact, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, would the panel agree that the mobility issue created by the challenges that mortgage holders face because of the bad risks they undertook with federal help, if you will, actually affects our unemployment rate materially today?
Many economists, Congresswoman, have pointed out the labor mobility problem entailed by having houses that are underwater on their mortgage. There's something else we could point out. For all the advantages of a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, there are also disadvantages to it. For example, if you're underwater and you have what is now a high-rate mortgage, you can't refinance it. That's what I call the dark side of the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, and we have to take that into account. It relates to this mobility problem.
Responding to the Congresswoman's question, there are a number of empirical studies that have looked both across countries and across states and have reached the conclusion that the higher your homeownership rate, the higher structural unemployment you have. And this is something that's very well found, peer-reviewed journals. My back of the envelope is at least a percentage point of the unemployment rate we're seeing today is due to the high homeownership rate we had going into the crisis.
And I thank you. And the gentlelady yields back, and the gentleman from California.